Hi, Bother Brigade. Here's what's bothering me today. So, if you haven't heard by now, a apparent draft statement about a future ruling on Roe v. Wade by the Supreme Court was leaked, and it was provided to Politico, and so they ran the breaking story. And the internet, again, if you haven't noticed somehow, has collectively lost its goddamn mind. But with good reason, because apparently the Supreme Court of the United States looks set to overturn Roe v. Wade, the thing that actually makes abortion a right, and the thing that right-wing evangelicals have been fighting against for like 50 odd years or so. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. So first off, it's finally happened, right? The right is finally making its play. It's really been a build up to this with all the different anti-abortion and abortion restriction laws in places like Texas, Idaho, I think Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, probably Florida, Oklahoma, like all over the place. There have been restrictive bills to target this so that, oh, look, now Roe v. Wade has been overturned. The problem is that apparently the draft, statement or whatever has pretty much very vaguely defined language, which means we're not just looking, potentially anyway, at the overturning of Roe v. Wade. We are looking at potentially, again, the overturning of LGBTQ rights, so gay marriage equality. We are looking at potentially, again, at the overturning of even interracial marriage. So it's just really messed up how nebulous the language is. And I want to, come back to that in a hot second. But first, I also just really got a rant about some of the really weird takes that I've seen from people in the wake of this announcement. Those of us who've been paying attention knew that this was kind of a long time coming based on various state laws that were being passed. And again, also all the anti-LGBTQ laws that have been passed or proposed in a variety of different states and legislatures. Those are all clearly working towards this goal of we don't like people who are different than us, and that's a huge problem. However, I'm also seeing people start to put blame on really weird things or tangentially related people like Susan Sarandon and Bernie Sanders and stuff like this. And people talking about, this is why you should have voted for Hillary so we could have avoided all this. And it's like, okay, so let me get this straight, right? In terms of the situation right now, never mind coulda, woulda, shoulda in the past that again is very, poorly defined. Right now, the Democrats control the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. They control the main branches of government. Biden, if he wanted to, could stack the Supreme Court. But all of this flies in the face of the fact that the Democrats have routinely refused to codify Roe v. Wade into law, because for them it's a lovely wedge issue to say, oh, you can't let the Republicans win. They'll roll back Roe v. Wade, and, that's why you gotta vote for us, and, we'll keep fighting for your rights. And here it is happening anyway, while the Democrats literally control all three branches of government. Also, wasn't Nancy Pelosi recently schmoozing and boozing with some anti-abortion candidate instead of the pro-choice Democratic candidate? Because I guess they were like, oh no, but that upsets my stock portfolio, or whatever neoliberal nightmare ghoul shit it's actually about with these people. The core point is, right, that these people, the Democrats, who continue to be like, oh, you need to donate to us now, you got to be super ready to vote. When has that fucking changed anything recently? The Democrats control theoretically everything right now, and the situation isn't changing. They've had nearly half a goddamn century to codify Roe v. Wade into law, but they haven't for a variety of reasons, most of them just very petty and political. And yet people are happy to fall into that line of thinking and propaganda while also blaming people like Bernie Sanders. Yeah, somehow this is Bernie's fault. Somehow. It's so ridiculous. But all of this to say that the people throwing around blame for, past actions, or that people didn't vote hard enough, or that they didn't support Hillary, or whatever terrible, awful, and false notion there is, the blame here lies with the 5 likely justices who are going to vote to rescind a constitutional right. So here we come back to what we said at the start. So, real quick aside, apparently the Supreme Court is upset that this draft was leaked. Unprecedented in modern history. We're very disappointed. Nothing like this has happened before. And, this may damage people's notion of believing in the apolitical nature of the court, which, by the by, I haven't believed in since the whole Bush v. Gore thing happened. So, anyway. It is the Supreme Court justices, especially the conservative ones, who look set to overturn Roe v. Wade that deserve the blame. They are the ones doing this right now, not Bernie Sanders, not, past what ifs, etc. It's these individuals, several of whom were appointed by Trump, one of whom isn't even familiar with the Constitution. Looking at you, Barrett. And the nature of their decision in terms of, and I think the leading opinion or whatever it's called is being done by Justice Alito. And he is a, rigid, I'm a realist in terms of like what the Constitution says. That's all it protects, which I mean, okay, so dude, then we have to talk about previous amendments of the Constitution because there were less states and there were certain amendments that, were very unsavory to my ancestors. So go off, I guess. But this whole thing is about apparently that it's about, privacy issues. That's how the original passing of, Roe v. Wade and everything was interpreted. It was a violation of people's privacy. So if they overturn this sets a few dangerous precedents. One, the precedent that apparently you don't have a right to privacy in America. So again, that overturns the various homosexuality laws and gay marriage laws. That's problem number one. But think also how this applies to, say, I don't know, your finances, your search history, your communications. America is just becoming increasingly such a information spy state that it's honestly probably making China blush. But no, when China does it, that's evil and totalitarian and dystopian. When America does it, it's to protect liberty and freedom. So that's one of the problems. Another one of the problems is that this then opens the door to further rescinding of rights and entitlements to privacy, if you want to call it that aren't related directly to, say, Roe v. Wade or anti-LGBTQ laws. That's just the biggest section that will be affected, but it's going to affect other people. And the final really big problem that comes from all this is something I know I touched on a while ago. Can't even remember which video it is. If I find it, I'll put it down below or in an annotation or something. But the core concept was that if something like this happens, where what's been interpreted as a right is then rescinded, that sets a terrible goddamn precedent of your rights being rescinded. So all the people on the right crowing about, oh yeah, isn't this great? Look, we're getting stuff done. Even if the Democrats have control over stuff, and we're finally protecting, God's beautiful unborn children, right? Oh, what a great day in America. Until eventually, maybe if we don't get to civil war by that point, you will see a return or an expanded court packed with Democrats, and with this precedent, suddenly you don't have the right to bear arms because, well, look, see, we overturned a previous existing right. So why can't we do that with other amendments to the Constitution, right? Given the unrest, maybe you do need to rescind the one about free press in a democratic society. In the interest of safety, maybe we should roll back the ability to address your grievances with your government. Maybe we also need to roll back the one about, not having to be forced to board soldiers. But, that's in the interest of freedom, right? And maybe other terrible nightmarish things like, well, I guess women don't have any rights anymore. And while we're at it, let's just maybe get rid of interracial marriage and, bring back slavery. I know it's unofficial now with the prison system, but let's just bring it back proper, right? Like, come on, we need people to work. And, well, people just aren't going back to work anymore because I don't pay them enough. And it's a terrible job. And customers don't treat people in the service industry with respect. And I know I've been saying for years, well, if you don't like it, just get a better job. But now, that's hurting me. So now we need to bring back slavery so that I can do this stuff. Come on. All these nightmares and more are yours to enjoy in a future dystopia that's not too far away. All because of this and the terrible precedents it could set, the nebulous language of the actual opinion and what's likely going to be pushed through. All these terrible things and more are likely to happen, all because people are so short-sighted and so uncomfortable around a topic that they felt the need to legislate against people's bodily autonomy. And yet the solutions that I've seen from people so far are to, we're just gotta make sure we get a blue wave in the midterms. Don't give up, anything. Like we're so close to getting work done. Even though a casual look at the past 2 years shows that the Democrats are just absolutely incompetent, if not outright malicious at this point. Kids are still in cages on the border. The whole Roe v. Wade thing, which still hasn't been codified into law. Look at what's happening right now while Dems supposedly control everything. Build Back Better, dead. Medicare for All, dead. Any kind of meaningful progress and support for Americans, dead. You literally have people say, well, at least Trump gave me money. That is how terrible and awful and ineffective the Democrats have been. And yet they and their supporters are insisting that the way out of this and to avoid this is, you just gotta protest and vote harder. It's so clear that we are well past this point right now. And it's so unfair to blame people like Bernie Sanders or, political hit campaigns against Hillary Clinton or Susan Sarandon. It is so ridiculously shallow and baseless to blame them when the 5 or more justices on the Supreme Court are set to do this and set terrible, god-awful precedents for generations to come. You know where they work, and I'm not saying anything about violence or burning down buildings or anything like that. All I am saying is that the way out of this is not more of the same. That much is clear, given the radical ineffectiveness of the Democratic Party. And I haven't even said anything about, Canadians acting really smug north of the border here, because we also have our own problems in terms of abortion access. Sure, it's legal, but talk to most people, it's very hard to actually attain. But that's kind of besides the point right now. We are here to talk about what's going on in the States and that terrible nightmare. And so what can we do now to actually fight back against this? Well, step 1 has already been the protests in front of the Supreme Court. That's a good first step. Other things you can do are to support various charities and organizations that are helping to make abortion more accessible or affordable for people wherever they are in the United States. I think there was one I recall reading about where they literally have volunteers to volunteer to drive you to a state where abortion is legal, or there's at least a clinic, and you can go there and they take care of that. It's like volunteer time, but again, hazy at best. But that's an opportunity for you to do something like that. So, get people to states where abortion is legal and you can actually access it. You can donate to Planned Parenthood. They don't only do abortion. It's also about safe sex practices, family health, and family planning. It's a bunch of good progressive stuff with Planned Parenthood. Also, other things people can do is to take lessons from other corners of the world where they have very conservative beliefs and value systems, and yet they still won progressive movement, at least, towards abortion being either more accessible or being determined a right. Mexico and the Republic of Ireland are the two that come immediately to mind in this regard, especially because they are arguably some of the more recent ones, especially Mexico. Both these nations are deeply Catholic, and that means that they tend to not enjoy discussions around birth control, but these two nations have seen meaningful progress. So maybe, I don't know, look into some of what they did in terms of actions and disruptions and how they ran various campaigns and got grassroots movement and support after just talking to people and in communities and pushing for it. And then there was kind of this swell of support, and they said, yeah, you know what? The court of public opinion seems to say we may not necessarily like abortion, but we tolerate it. Okay, there we go. That is a way of putting pressure. Another way of putting pressure, just throwing this out there, maybe all the women who, they have their value just completely taken granted for. All the women who, work in the workforce. We're talking like white collar, blue collar, service sector, gig worker, unpaid labor because you're a stay-at-home mom. Maybe one of the things to do is if women everywhere, regardless of, whether they're stay-at-home moms, they're, a big exec somewhere, or they're just a girl working at your local Tim Hortons or your Starbucks or something. What if women just withheld their labor in a kind of general strike of sorts to protest and saying, well, if this is restrictive, and so if I can't, work because I have to take care of this unwanted child that I wasn't ready for, then, I can't come into work today unless you, maybe change the rules or leave them as is and let Roe v. Wade stand. Considering how much of a chunk of the U.S. economy the women workforce is, and considering that capitalists only ever understand threats and actions in the language of money, which is the only language they truly understand, maybe that would be the appropriate response to this. Not swearing to vote harder in the midterms. Not just, protesting. Sure, that's always a good first step to voice your anger, your displeasure. But, maybe some grassroots organization and sharing of resources and withholding one's labor to make the capitalists realize, oh, wait, no, I don't like losing money. I hate that more than I hate women having abortions. Okay, nope, never mind. Maybe that is what needs to happen. But the fact that Democrats, who already control all levels of government, are just saying, no, you just need to, give us more of your money. They have allowed this to happen. So voting harder for them isn't going to fix the solution. And the fact that people believe these jackasses is definitely what's bothering me today.